I was chewing nicotine gum so hard my jaw sounded like a bad turn signal when the stone arch for Sable Ridge National Park slid past the passenger window. July in the high country had that strange combination of sharp and soft, air like clean glass, sunlight with teeth, a glacial creek along the road throwing silver at the cottonwoods. If you're lucky, places like this convince you the world's still worth the fight. If you do what I do, you learn Pretty and Safe are second cousins who stopped talking years ago. Riley Torres drove like rookies do, 10 and 2, eyes forward, thoughts loud. Chief Ranger's name is Dana Kovacs, she said, tapping her phone against the dash to wake the map. 3 disappearances in 21 days. Same corridor, Timberline Loop to Black Meadow. That's your backyard, right? Don't say backyard, I said. Backyard makes people think fences mean anything out here. She took the correction with that good soldier nod they must issue with the badge. 30, Army Reserve, former biology grad student. The department's answer to a problem you can't shoot. We needed brains that knew the difference between animal behavior and whatever isn't. You think it's animal? She asked. If this were bear sign, I said, we wouldn't be here. Kovacs met us on the steps of the WPA-era ranger station, a lodgepole A-frame that looked like America built it to take a punch. She had the posture of someone who'd stood behind a Pulaski and won. Her handshake said, I don't have time for your charm, Mercer, which was good because I'd left what I had of it in 2009. Agents, she said, you're late. We're federal, I said. We exist in a different time zone. You exist in my park, she said, then turned on a heel that made me want to straighten mine. The briefing room smelled like rope and coffee and maps that had learned to lie. On the table, topo sheets pinned flat with steel tacks, a neat stack of laminated closures, 3 manila folders with names in black Sharpie. Kovacs laid the photos out like a small chapel service. Vanessa Cole, 38, nurse from Boise. Mile marker 6 on Timberline. Husband walked 20 yards to fill bottles, turned back. Vanessa was gone. No obvious struggle. No prints that help. Baseball cap freckles, a smile earned honestly. Vanessa looked like a friend of a friend, which is the worst kind of photo. Austin Hale, 15, summer resident, night fishing with 2 buddies. They reported lights like lightning bugs but the wrong color. He was bringing up the rear. They stopped to tie a lace. He wasn't behind them anymore. Braces fish held out to the camera, that unkillable August in a kid's eyes. Dr. Martin Wu, 46, hydrologist, contracted to assess watershed impacts post-floods, texted his wife a thunderhead photo, truck still in the lot. He left a data logger near Black Meadow. Middle part, wedding band, field vest pockets full of competence. Riley's thumbs danced. Any denominators besides corridor? Barometric pressure dips before each, Kovacs said. Cells build and skirt off, not unheard of, patterns too neat. We closed Timberline this morning. The internet says I hate families and America. I ran a finger along the topo. The Timberline loop mirrored the creek, climbed a saddle, spilled into a high meadow pocked with limestone. Old country, glacial teeth marks, places like that hold noise in their mouths. Missing 3 in 21 days is a crisis anywhere, I said. In a park with this visitation, it's a powder keg with a candle for a fuse. Keep the loop closed. Push the closure a mile wider for optics. We'll make it worth the hate mail. Her mouth twitched, but I couldn't tell which direction. Show me something that looks like progress, and I'll wear the villain cape till Labor Day. We took 2 ATVs because the maintenance road had a grudge against oil pans. The trailhead gate rattled behind us, Kovacs locking it herself even though she could have sent a tech. Some people delegate. Some people don't trust a lock unless it bites their own hand. We climbed a moraine and dropped into a river valley where the creek ran flat and glassy like it had somewhere else to be. Witness trees, old ponderosas with puzzle-piece bark, punched up through second growth, their fire scars reading like braille for giants. The day had a faint metallic taste under the pine, the pre-storm ion tang you get when the sky is thinking about thunder. 100 yards in, Kovacs crouched and pointed. Riley and I kneeled beside her. The print wasn't a print in the way a man wants. Bears write books in mud, cougars sketch sentences. This was an argument. Cloven, yes, but the weight map was wrong. Pressure sank hard at the forefoot, as if the thing had levered itself forward from a joint that didn't belong on anything from this century. Riley slid a pelican case off her back and popped it open. She handed me nitrile gloves without looking. I took them without thanking. We're both adults. She lifted a baton of sensors and thumbed the power, a spectral trace scanner. Our lab calls it the Estwell. She calls it the glow stick because she's 30 and history is dead. If there's cold light, ionized residue, this will give us a waveform, she said, businesslike now. Don't say waveform on a first date, I said. She gave me a smile that meant I'm not new to people like you and swept the scanner over the cloven riddle. The wand hummed low and polite and then chimed, a sound like an elevator. That's sure you meant floor 2. She glanced at the readout. 28 Hertz bias. Microtesla up 3 over baseline. That's mind-affecting territory if it spikes. Which it usually does, I said. Which it usually does, she echoed, and the smile went where smiles go when someone says the word usually wrong. We canvassed daylight grids like people who'd done this too many times to confuse motion with progress. A debris jam big enough to hide a body. A game track where the understory softened to a footpath that wasn't on the map. A cluster of mushrooms at a fir's base. 3 caps sliced off clean and left beside the stump like coins. I photographed them with a scale card and a sinking feeling. Food cache marker, I said. For what? Kovacs asked, already knowing she wouldn't like it. If we're unlucky, us. By 4 p.m., the sky had built itself a sermon, anvils on anvils stacking blue to bruise. Thunder talked to itself up canyon, never committing, flexing in a mirror. Kovacs called in 2 more closures and a public safety notice that sounded calm on the radio and like fear printed out. At twilight, we made camp a quarter mile off timberline. No tent, just bivy sacks and a fire so thin it felt like a suggestion. You don't announce yourself in someone else's church. Riley unrolled her gear like a surgeon laying out steel. Anti-hypnosis band wrist, steel gray hairline seam. Spectral mic that records what ears call a feeling, plate-sized drone, 2 tasers. 1 sidearm she wore heavy because guns carry ghosts even when you don't. You sleep in the field, she asked, not an icebreaker so much as a measure. I sleep anywhere there's something worth waking up for. That's supposed to sound wise. It's supposed to sound employed. She laughed and it landed on the creek and drifted downstream. For a minute the park was just a park. Water said the thing water says. A saw-whet owl threw its question. Fire gnawed a stick like it was remembering a story. The hum announced itself like a thought I didn't want. Not a sound at first. A pressure feathering the inside of the ear. A bass you feel in the bones of your face. The fire chose that moment to tilt and gutter, which is what flame does when air forgets which way is up. Riley looked at me, I nodded. She thumbed the band. A green LED woke like an eye that had always been open. Across the creek, beyond the third cottonwood, the one with lightning scar down its crown, 2 points of amber lifted from the dark as if someone had polished a pair of reflectors and hung them at shoulder height on nothing. Not deer, not coyote, not anything that honors our tables of height. Don't look straight at it, I said. Start at the shoulder if it has one. That's encouraging. I'm a fountain of gifts. The amber didn't brighten so much as it thinned, color washing out toward the edges until the air behind it warped like heat. The hum ticked up a half step and found the same notch our scanner had loved in the mud. My heart took orders from someone else. My left hand, old break, never healed right, started to ache like it was about to rain. Riley's band pinged. The spectral mic on the log drew a line only a computer would admire. She didn't shake, but if she'd been a glass on a bar, you'd have set a coaster under her. The thing didn't blink because blinking is a human problem. The eyes widened and reached a fraction toward us as if testing a size it preferred. Shadows at the edge of the timberline tilted the way a room leans when a large man decides to stand up. Backsight, I said, meaning, close your eyes. I closed mine. We're going to see it anyway. People who haven't been here laugh at that. People who have don't. Behind my eyelids a posture assembled itself. The height of a man, the length of a wrong weight pitched forward like a runner refusing the gun. I smelled sap warming and limestone wet as a mouth that didn't bother trying to be a cave. Riley's fingers touched my sleeve, not a grab, a reminder. Her voice came clipped and calm. I can still choose my breath. That's a good sign. It is, I said, though the part of me that keeps score muttered good for now. The hum cut mid-syllable. The amber wicks snuffed like someone pinched them. Crickets returned with the righteous indignation of a union. The fire found its draw. Somewhere up canyon thunder miscounted on purpose. I opened my eyes to trees and creek and an emptiness made worse by how much it looked like normal. Kovacs wasn't with us, she had a station to hold, but I used my radio voice anyway. We're on its side of the river. It crossed, Riley whispered. It didn't have to. We have rules about first nights. Don't chase, don't bluff, don't tell the rookie she looks pale. We followed 2 out of 3. Midnight sifted a lace of rain through the cottonwoods. The Bivy's hood gathered drops and let them pop on my cheek. I slept the way a criminal sleeps next to a county road, one ear going home alone. I dreamed, if it was dreaming, of a ledger big as a church Bible, pages foxed and oiled by long hands. A thumb pressed a line under a name, and for a second the paper looked like bark. The scream that woke me wasn't animal or human. It was a device. And if you've done this work longer than one paycheck, that's worse. My phone strobe-lit the Bivy roof with an unkind white. The tone that followed was calibrated in a lab to step on the heart. Riley was already half up, boots in one hand, shotgun in the other, hair plastered to her cheek by the rain. "Band's green," she said, crisp. "I don't feel fogged." "Your tracker," I said, because my eyes were catching up and my mouth was early. "Moving," she said, and shoved the display at me. A pulsing dot blinked bright and fast, sprinting across the creek on the map, bearing hard for the limestone ridge like it had run this course 100 nights and never once hit a root. The dot made an angle clean, inhumanly efficient, and kept going. "You didn't." "I didn't move," she said. "I didn't even sit up before the alarm." "Then something took your signal," I said, and the words felt dumb and true. "Is that a thing?" she asked. "It's a new thing," I said, and jammed my feet into wet boots fast enough to fold a heel. We didn't run. We jogged like men who have carried bodies run, efficient, heels quiet, lights low. The creek lied the way creeks lie, knee-deep until it wasn't, cold like mountain glass poured down your back. On the far bank the hum rose again, the kind of bass you feel in your molars. My jaw wanted to click. I told it no. The dot paused at the base of the ridge, pulsed brighter, then cut north along a limestone lip, where the creek chewed away at the land like a habit it couldn't quit. Rain slicked the rock, alder undergrowth grabbed our thighs, everything that could make noise tried. Somewhere to the west a coyote sang 3 notes and changed its mind. The mouth of the cave wasn't theatrical, just an oval where stone had decided a door would be a good joke. You could walk past it every day and never know you were playing house on someone else's floor. The air from the hole tasted like pennies and old river. Useful, my brain supplied, which is not what you want your brain to say about a cave. We stopped under the lip listening. Sound in limestone is a liar. It folds and refolds, nests on itself, travels through bone before it hits ear. But some sounds refuse to be lost, the human smalls, a wet swallow, a shoe whispering grit-counted breathing. Riley watched the tracker, a dot steady now at the edge of her screen. "It stopped moving," she mouthed. "It's waiting," I mouthed back, and hated that the sentence felt like it had been written before I said it. I checked her band, green, checked her hand, steady, checked my taser charge, full, and thought briefly of the 40 on my hip like a weight from another life. "You with me?" I asked. "I am," she said, "and I'm not going to do the thing where I tell you I'm fine." "That's my line," I said, and she almost smiled. We slipped into the throat of the cave with that sidestep shuffle all mammals use when a space knows your width. Riley flipped her headlamp to low red. The beam picked out a char ring in the floor where someone had burned recently, edges crisp, ash fine. The ceiling lowered to kiss my hat brim, then rose again in a small chamber that could have been cut to size for a camp you never wanted to meet. The smell hit me first. Sap warmed past polite, limestone wet, and something iron underneath like a mouth that had forgotten its manners. My chest did that hollow thing it does when an old mistake comes home wearing a new coat. Riley's hand found my sleeve for the second time that night. I didn't tell her not to. Being human is sometimes the only countermeasure we get. At the far side of the chamber, where the roof arched like a chaplain's palm, the stone did something that was not a trick of light. For a second the rock looked like bark, the way a mirage looks like water until you're close enough to drink. Something amber breathed in the seam down the center of the shape, a cold light pulsing at a patient heart rate. "Band," I whispered. "Green," she said, "but my skin feels wrong, like the pressure before a migraine." "Don't touch anything," I said, which is a hilarious sentence in a cave that wants to be a mouth. From deeper in, a sound shifted, call it footfalls if you like your words simple. Not the big roll of a bear or the sticky whisper of a cat. Light, purposeful, human enough to make your head believe your eyes will be relieved. Human enough to make your eyes wrong. Riley's tracker pulsed once on her wrist and then stopped as if a finger had rested on the screen from the other side. "Jack," she said. "I know," I said. We stood in the dark at the edge of a room that felt waited for. The cave breathed. Outside, the storm counted down, rain working the cottonwoods into a soft argument. Behind us, the creek rehearsed the word always. I moved my hand to the taser and felt, ridiculous, immediate, an urge to step forward and place my palm on that amber seam, as if the light were a stove burner and I were a child who'd learned nothing. The urge was so clean it felt like hunger. Riley's fingers tightened and the hunger snapped like a bad twig. The hum lifted to the notch the glow stick had loved. 28 hertz. The place music ends and something else begins. The low red light painted the stone with a ship's-at-war glow. Something shifted deeper in the cave, the kind of sound you feel across the ribs. "Back out?" she asked, even though we both knew we were past the back-out point before we crossed the creek. "On 3, I said. "This chamber, then the throat, then air." We reached 2. And that was when the tracker on her wrist, the one flashing steady at the edge of the display, jumped alive like a heart that had been waiting for applause and sprinted again. A sharp vector arrowing across the map beyond the ridge toward a cluster of limestone moss dotted like moth-eaten places on a coat. "Jesus," Riley hissed, "it's moving again." "No," I said, because the thought arrived whole and uninvited. "We are." "What?" "It's pulling us. The dot is an anchor, not a beacon. It's not running, it's reeling." The hum deepened. The amber seam brightened a single polite degree. "On 1 we run," I said, and my voice came out as someone else's. "Copy," she said, jaw set. 3, I said. 2. We hit 1 and turned for the throat, and behind us something inhaled. A long, patient breath that belonged to a thing that did not hurry for anyone. And the cave tightened by a fraction, stone remembering how to be teeth. We made the mouth in a tangle of knees and breath and choices, out into rain that was suddenly extremely interested in our faces. The creek sounded like a crowd. The cottonwoods had collected all the wind and were shaking it over us like a wet dog. Riley slapped her wrist. The dot raced across the creek on the display, too fast for legs, and shot a look at me that said I don't have a metaphor for this. I didn't either. We crashed the water at the ford that had lied to us earlier. I didn't feel the cold this time. The hum was behind us and everywhere. My teeth thrummed. The anti-hypnosis band stayed green, and yet the world insisted on making tunnels around my vision like I were a man about to pass out or pass through. We gained the far bank in a spray of stones and decisions. Trees, real ones, loomed up and presented themselves for the first time in an hour. I smelled the good stink of wet dirt that hasn't seen pavement since God forgot to invent it. Thunder put a period on whatever the last sentence was. Riley looked down at her wrist. The pulsing dot had stopped dead again. This time it wasn't at the cave. It had jumped ahead, settled in a perfect circle of limestone mouths farther north, a place I knew from old maps and worse memories. She swallowed. "It's at the mall." I nodded because I didn't have anything worthwhile to say with a mouth. The rain eased like a held breath let out. Somewhere to our left, an elk coughed. Above us, the sky rolled a thought around and chose not to say it yet. The park listened to itself. Riley lifted the tracker so we were both looking when it happened. The dot pulsed once, bright as a heartbeat on a hospital monitor, and then a second dot winked alive on the same screen, closer to us than it had any business being. It sat between us and the mall like a choice. We never got to argue about it. Something moved behind the third cottonwood, the one with the lightning scar, and the amber eyes rose from the dark again, closer than comfort, brighter than rain, fixed at a height that made men do math they didn't want to do. "Jack," Riley said, voice careful on my name. "I see it," I said, and reached to tap her band with a finger that didn't feel like mine, felt my own heart answer to a beat I'd never learned, and thought a thought I had sworn off thinking. "We're not hunting it. It's walking us in." The tracker chimed twice, polite as a butler. Across the creek, toward the limestone mall, the dot started to run. The cave didn't wait for us to decide. It pulled us in like a lung-taking breath. The limestone throat widened after 20 feet, and my headlamp swept a chamber that could have been carved for sermons no one wanted to attend. Kill sites layered the floor, deer ribs stacked in haphazard grids, antlers snagged in corners, and something worse tucked into the shadow. A hiking boot with the leather chewed ragged, laces cut clean, tongue spread like it had tried to scream. Above it all, a ledge ran along the back wall, high enough that you wouldn't notice unless you looked up. Rope scars furrowed into the stone where something had tied and untied again and again. The grooves were old, polished by decades of use. Ledges don't wear like that unless something keeps coming back. I felt Riley stop behind me. She whispered, "That's not one season of kills." "No," I said, "that's a ledger in bones." I moved forward, slow. My boot brushed a rib that snapped like brittle chalk. The sound made the chamber breathe heavier. That was when I heard it, a soft human whimper. I froze, swept my light right then down. Curled against the wall under a spill of debris was a boy. Clothes torn but not shredded, face pale under the grime, wrists bound with cheap cord. His chest lifted shallow, but it lifted, alive. "Jesus," I muttered, "kid." I crouched and reached for him, but Riley's voice came from behind me, flat, mechanical. "Step back, Jack." I turned. Riley's sidearm was up, sight trained square between my shoulder blades. Her eyes weren't Riley's eyes. They were glassy, lid heavy, the kind of stare people wear when sleepwalking on a rooftop. "Riley," I said carefully, "that's not you talking." "Step back," she repeated, monotone. I raised both hands, taser dangling by the trigger guard. My gum tasted like battery acid. That was when the smell hit. Broth, onion, fat rendered slow. Cooking smells don't belong in caves. My light swept across the chamber, and I saw him. An old man at a wooden table, sleeves rolled, knife working through root vegetables with the calm of a Sunday supper. A pot simmered on a crude iron grate over an orange flame that shouldn't have drawn breath underground. He stirred, wiped the blade on a cloth, and kept his back to us as if we were late guests. Behind him, the firelight didn't behave. It stretched into 3 long shadows on the wall, necks too long, heads bulbous, jaws unhinged. A tricephalic silhouette, each throat swaying on a hinge of smoke, each mouth full of teeth the old man's body didn't own. The boy whimpered again. Riley's gun never wavered. The old man spoke without turning. His voice was kind, too kind. "You brought company, Martin, a partner. Good, we like balance." "I'm not Martin," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. "Names don't matter," he said, dicing another root. "Debt does." The shadows on the wall shifted. One head bent low over the boy, another stretched toward Riley, the third fixed on me. The hum returned deeper, dragging my chest with it. I knew if I let it keep climbing, Riley would pull that trigger, not because she wanted to, but because the thing inside this cave did. So I did the one thing you do when you're out of time. I raised the taser, aimed center mass at the old man's back, and squeezed. White light filled the chamber. The old man convulsed, knife clattering. The shadows shrieked in chorus, the walls vibrating like a struck bell. The broth boiled over, hissing across stone. Riley gasped, staggered back, eyes clearing just for a second. Then the light died, and from somewhere deeper in the cave, behind all the shrieking echoes, came a single, long inhale, low, cavernous, deliberate. Something bigger had just woken up. The taser's glow fizzled out, leaving nothing but the cave's borrowed firelight and the stink of scorched wool. The old man crumpled against the table, knife clattering across stone. His shadow stretched, those 3 long necks swaying like cobras, snapped back into his frame and folded into nothing. Riley gasped like a diver breaking surface. Her pistol sagged, band on her wrist pulsing green as if it had just remembered its job. She stumbled, pressed her free hand to her temple. God, it was inside me. "Stay with me, Torres," I said, crouching low, taser still up. "Band's holding. That means it didn't own you, just borrowed." She shivered. Felt like more than a borrow. The boy whimpered again, voice high and thin. I edged closer, cutting his bindings with my pocket blade. His wrists were raw, skin rubbed raw to blood. He looked at me with pupils so wide they nearly swallowed the brown. "I didn't mean," he stammered. "I didn't." I steadied his shoulder. "Kid, slow down. What happened?" His lip trembled. "The rabbit." "What rabbit?" Riley asked, still breathing hard, voice sharper than she meant. The boy's voice cracked as he spoke, words spilling in gasps. "By the river. I shot it with my slingshot. It screamed and wouldn't stop. I smashed it with a rock, and I cut it." His breath hitched, chest heaving. "I thought it was funny. I thought it was just a rabbit." I felt Riley stiffen beside me. The old man groaned where he lay, lifting his head just enough to smirk, blood at his lip. "You see," he rasped. His voice was steady, too steady for a stunned man. "This is no innocent. This is rot before ripening. A culling was required. I am not the monster here." "Shut it," I barked, but the words tasted brittle. The boy sobbed louder, hands over his ears as if his own confession had broken something inside him. Riley shifted, torn between pity and disgust. The cave itself seemed to lean closer, waiting for judgment. My boot scuffed something half buried in ash near the ledge. I bent, brushing soot away with my glove. Metal caught my light, a brass token worn smooth by decades of handling. I picked it up, cold as ice, heavy for its size. Stamped deep in its face was an oak leaf, veins etched sharp enough to cut. Beneath, words in neat block. "Keep the balance." The weight of it settled into my palm like a verdict. I closed my fist and slid it into my pocket before Riley could ask. Whatever this was, it wasn't evidence for the chain of custody. It was older, hungrier. The cave's fire guttered as if offended, smoke curling low. The old man chuckled, voice rough but unshaken. "Now you carry it too, you'll see soon enough." Before I could reply, my radio shrieked to life, static clawing at the chamber. A ranger's voice cut through, urgent and ragged. Chief Kovacs, come in. We've got movement, Loop B near the camp road. It's God. Its fast, bipedal silhouette crossed 200 yards in under 3 seconds. The transmission cracked out, replaced by silence so sudden it rang in my ears. Riley's eyes met mine, wide and clear now, no glaze. The kid whimpered, curling tighter against the stone. And all I could think was, the thing in here wasn't the only predator keeping score tonight. The ranger's call still echoed in my ears when we climbed out of the cave. The night had gone heavy, storm clouds banking against the ridges, lightning sketching lines without thunder's permission. Kovacs was waiting by the ATVs, jaw set tight as coiled rope. "Loop B," she said. "2 of my men swore they saw something move faster than headlights can sweep. You'd better have something more than theories." I didn't answer. I still felt the brass token burning a circle in my pocket. Words stamped deep into my palm, "Keep the balance." We cut across gravel and brush, engines whining low until Loop B opened under the sickle moon. The ground here was sandy enough to remember things, and it had remembered something ugly. Kovacs' flashlight beam froze on a trail of prints. At first glance, wolf, broad pad, claws scoring the sand, but when I crouched, the hairs on my neck stood. "Not wolf," I muttered. Riley knelt beside me. "You see it too." I traced the shape with a gloved finger. The heel and outer edge carried the weight like a wolf, but the mid-foot depression was wrong. Too long, too flat, pressure in the arch where no wolf should press. It's carrying itself like a man, I said. Not on all fours, not classic werewolf either, something hybrid, choosing which law of physics to honor. Kovacs swallowed, light trembling over the tracks. That's not possible. Neither are three-headed shadows cooking stew, Riley said flatly, but here we are. We followed the trackway half a mile until it cut across a dry creek bed and vanished into scrub oak. The silence was too even, like the woods were holding breath. That's when Kovacs spoke, voice lower than the wind. There's something I never put in the official reports. I glanced at her. Now's the time. My grandfather was a ranger here in the 30s. He kept a diary. Most of it's fire reports, weather notes. But near the end, he wrote about things. He called them the caretakers of the oak. Said they moved between forms. Said the park itself answered to them. Riley stopped cold. Caretakers. She glanced at me, realization dawning. I didn't pull the token out of my pocket, but I didn't need to. I already knew we weren't dealing with folklore in the abstract. We were dealing with its accountants. We reached the ridge line, scrub oak twisted under lightning, ground broken by shale, too open for comfort, too narrow for safety. Riley unpacked her thermal drone, a dinner plate machine that hummed like a nest of hornets. She sent it skyward, screen glowing in her hands. There, she whispered. On the display, a heat bloom weaving through the scrub at impossible speed, darting between cover like it had read the terrain before we were born. Range, I asked. 200 yards, closing. The hum started again, infrasound, sub-bass pushing through marrow, rattling fillings. My knees wanted to fold. My chest tightened as if someone had set a sandbag on it. Riley gritted her teeth, green light pulsing on her band. It's trying to fog us. Stay upright. I clenched my jaw until I thought enamel would chip, forcing one step after another while the world bent sideways. The ridgeline swam, scrub oak trunks doubling, tripling. Eyes on feed, Riley gasped. It's flanking us. On the screen, the thermal shape darted left, then right, then stilled in a clearing. For a moment it crouched, four-limbed, lupine. Then it rose. The drone held steady overhead, image ghostly white and gray. The creature's outline glowed wolf-shaped from snout to haunch until the shoulders shifted. From the left side of its back something unfolded. Not fur, not claw. A human hand, pale and unmistakable, emerging like it had always been there, flexing fingers against the night. Riley sucked in breath. Kovacs swore under it. The infrasound cut in that instant, leaving silence sharper than any howl. And on the screen, the hand beckoned. The storm broke just before dawn, leaving the world washed raw and silent. By the time we made it back to the historic ranger station, Kovacs' men had already swept Loop B and found nothing but torn brush and the uneasy knowledge that pawprints can lie. Kovacs met us on the porch, shoulders hunched in the gray light. She didn't say a word, just unlocked the main door and led us inside. The lodge smelled of wet rope and wood smoke. We passed the map room, the bunk alcove, and the old dispatcher's desk with its rotary phone. Kovacs stopped at a wall paneled in knotty pine. Without a word, she dragged a filing cabinet away, revealing a hatch disguised as floorboard. "You didn't get this from me," she muttered. A steel ring handle lay recessed in the wood. She heaved it up, hinges groaning. A narrow stair descended into stale dark. Riley frowned. Basements aren't code in structures like this. They weren't supposed to have a ledger room either, Kovacs said, voice flat. We followed her down. The air thickened, dry as paper left too long in a trunk. My headlamp-painted shelves bolted into stone walls. Everyone was locked behind iron mesh, and every shelf sagged with thick, leather-bound volumes. Dust swirled in our breath like old ghosts. Kovacs unlocked one cage with a key on a chain around her neck. She slid a ledger free and dropped it on the central table. The binding creaked like a groan. Inside, the pages were filled with neat block handwriting, ink browned with age. At the top of each entry, a date, a location, a name. Some were human, some weren't. Authorized removals. 1911, Riley whispered, flipping a page. First year this station opened. The entries rolled on like an executioner's diary: deer, elk, black bear. Then human names: men, women, children. Each followed by a note: cleared, balance restored, authorized. My stomach tightened. This wasn't evidence of random attacks. This was a system. Riley's voice shook. They've been keeping count. Over a century of disappearances signed off. Kovacs crossed her arms, eyes hard but guilty. I told you my grandfather wrote about caretakers. He wasn't writing fables. He was writing minutes. In the corner of the sub-basement stood something stranger. An old crank-powered lift, iron teeth meshed with chain. A wooden platform resting at floor level. A faded placard above it read storage, restricted. Kovacs hesitated, then cranked the handle. Chains rattled, gears groaned. The platform rose slowly, coughing dust into the room. What it carried made my skin crawl. Glass jars, dozens of them, neatly arranged in a steel rack. Each jar glowed faintly with the same wrong amber cold light we'd seen in the woods. Inside swirled motes like fireflies drowned in syrup. Labels on parchment strips marked each vessel: Trail 6, 1952. Black Meadow, 1978. Loop B, 1999. Riley stared. Residual essence. They've been harvesting it. Kovacs shut her eyes, and bottling the park's debts. I turned back to the ledger on the table, flipping to the last pages. My hands knew which year to find even before my eyes did. 2009. The year I lost my last partner. I found his name printed in that same steady block script. Agent Daniel Harlow. Beside it, a date. The night he died in a cave collapsed during a routine hunt in the Rockies. Only it wasn't routine. The ledger entry marked him as authorized removal. My breath caught. The words blurred on the page. My partner hadn't just died on the job. He'd been taken, signed off like a deer or a bear. The token in my pocket felt heavier, as if it had always known. Behind me, the lift chain stilled, the jars humming faintly. Riley's hand brushed my sleeve. "Jack." I didn't answer. Because in that moment I understood. The caretakers hadn't just been culling the wild. They'd been culling us. The ledger stayed open on the table long after dawn bled into the station windows. My partner's name, Harlow, still glared from the page like an accusation. Riley closed it softly, as though we could smother the truth by shutting paper. But the park wasn't done talking. That evening, Riley dragged me to the North Slope. She'd been pacing the maps, tracing the places where the disappearances lined up, muttering to herself like a mathematician praying in code. "Look," she said, crouching under a massive ponderosa. The trunk was scarred, not by fire this time, but by sigils carved into bark, concentric circles broken with crosshatches, almost runic. Old, grown over in places, but deliberate. I ran a finger along one groove. Sap oozed slow, sticky as dried blood. "Boundary marks," Riley said. "They match patterns from the ledger locations. The trees themselves are the lines of the Pact, witness trees, alive longer than men keep promises, serving as cornerstones for something older." I stepped back, scanning the ridge. Once you saw one, you saw them all. Every fourth giant carried a scar, each sigil pointing inward. A fence built in silence. Kovacs called in a name I didn't expect. Earl Maddox, 83, retired ranger who still lived in the Park Service town. We drove out to his cabin, a place smelling of oilskin and pipe smoke. Earl's hands shook pouring coffee, but his voice steadied when Riley showed him the sigil photos. "You found him," he said. "Caretaker marks. My father taught me what little he knew. His father before him said the parks weren't founded, they were adopted by something older. We didn't guard the land, we kept to our side of the Pact." "What did the Pact say?" I asked. Earl shrugged. "Balance, always balance. You take too many trees, storms come. Too many hunters, game disappears. Too many tourists, well, you've seen the missing. Caretakers don't kill at random, they keep the rings even." "And the ledgers?" Riley pressed. Earl's gaze dropped. "Records of the toll, names of what was traded to keep the rest safe." That night, Kovacs guided us to a meadow cut into a bowl of pines. At its center lay a circle of stumps, old logging scars set like seats in a forgotten council. The locals called it the Story Circle, a place the early crews used for meetings and later bonfires. We lit no fire. The moon handled the job, silvering every stump and throwing long bars into the grass. We waited. The forest thickened around us. Air pressed heavy, infrasound tugging my ribs. Then, along the tree line, the shadows began to gather, tall, indistinct, not stepping forward but leaning as though the dark itself bent inward to listen. Riley stiffened. "We're not alone." "No," I said. "We're at the table." Kovacs muttered something like a prayer. My hand closed over the brass token in my pocket. It pulsed faintly against my skin, warmer than before, as though it had been waiting to be recognized. The shadows didn't move closer, but they didn't need to. You could feel them watching, measuring. Then from the dark, a voice rolled low, human in shape, but older in cadence, syllables worn smooth by centuries. "Agent Mercer." My blood froze. "We remember your promise." The token in my hand flared hot and the meadow held its breath. The Story Circle broke at dawn. No answers, no demands, just that voice rolling from the timberline, reminding me of a promise I didn't remember making. Kovacs didn't speak on the ride back, and Riley kept checking her band like she half expected it to start smoking. The park, meanwhile, had moved on without us. Families still tried to sneak campsites. Teenagers still ignored closures. And something small and wrong decided to test the boundaries. We hit Campground F around dusk, called in on a panicked report. Strange animals like raccoons but not pulling food from the fire pits. They weren't raccoons. A troop of borrowers swarmed the campground, 24 of them, hunched things the size of dogs, hides stitched from mottled fur and carrion scraps. Their mouths weren't mouths so much as open seams that clicked when they mimicked. They tore through trash bags, pulled at coolers, even pawed at the picnic tables. Campers had already fled, leaving lanterns swinging and marshmallows burned black on sticks. Kovacs swore under her breath. "Haven't seen a troop this far south in 20 years. "Why now?" Riley asked. I answered without looking away, "Because the boundaries are bleeding." The borrowers skittered in circles, eyes glinting like wet coins. Every few seconds one would raise its head and croak a sound it had stolen. A child's laugh, a dog's bark, the metallic ping of a tent pole. I unclipped a pouch, slid out flashbangs. Riley's eyes narrowed. "Wait, non-lethal dispersal might work. Noise sent, these things react like scavengers. We can push them out without burning them." Riley, I said, arming the first grenade, they don't understand push, they understand feed and scatter. Her hand caught my wrist. We don't have to kill them just to prove a point. I met her stare. She was green, but she was right about one thing: this wasn't a hunt, it was a trespass. Still, when scavengers get bold, they don't stop at garbage. They start testing doors. Fine, I muttered, sliding the pin back. But if they come for us, we drop the training wheels. We herded them toward the trash corral, a fenced-off zone where dumpsters and bare boxes lined up like metal coffins. Kovacs banged on the corral gate with her baton, drawing the troop closer. Riley deployed a sonic lure from her pack, an emitter tuned to high-frequency whine. The borrowers twitched, skittered, heads jerking like marionettes. Then they did something I'll never forget. They stitched together a voice, not one of them, but all clicking and coughing fragments until the words broke through like bad radio. "Don't hurt us." Riley froze. "Jack, did you hear? Keep moving," I snapped, though the back of my neck crawled. The chorus repeated, louder this time, cobbled from campers' scraps of speech. "Don't hurt us, please, please." It was wrong. Too human, too broken. The plea of a tape machine strangled in static. The troop pressed tighter against the bare boxes, claws scraping metal, eyes reflecting lantern light like shards of broken glass. Then one lunged. I yanked Riley back and hurled a flashbang. White fire ripped the dark, the blast echoing off steel. The borrower shrieked, scrambled, and the troop broke, scattering into the timberline in a chorus of stolen cries. For a second, silence held. Then I realized something was missing. "Kovacs!" I barked, turning. Her flashlight beam was lying on its side, rolling weak arcs across the gravel. Beside it, deep claw marks dragged into the dirt, pulling toward the largest bare box at the edge of the corral. The door of the box rattled once, twice, then slammed shut with a sound like a coffin lid. Kovacs was gone. Riley's band pinged green, useless as ever, while the woods swallowed the last of the borrower's echoes. And from the trees came that same broken chorus: "Don't hurt us, don't hurt us." The campground was chaos by morning, families rushing to pack, rangers posting tape, whispers of wild animals and attack. We said nothing about borrowers or mimic voices. Some truths curdle faster than milk in sunlight, but Kovacs hadn't come back. Her radio still pinged, muted, faint, below us. Lot C sat at the edge of an old service road, cracked asphalt lined with faded stall numbers. Overnight, the earth had opened there. A sinkhole yawned across 4 spaces, asphalt caved inward like melted crust. We rigged a rope and dropped inside. The air was cooler, damp with limestone breath. My headlamp painted the walls, not rock, not soil, fossilized ribs, huge arcs of calcium locked into the earth like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral built from bones. At the bottom, 30 feet down, Kovacs' radio blinked faint red. It lay half buried in sediment, dragging out weak pings like a heartbeat on its last legs. "She's alive," Riley said, eyes too wide. "She has to be." I wasn't so sure. We followed the signal deeper through a narrow chute. The rock here held a strange resonance, every sound doubled, warped. Our boots scraped, echoes running ahead like scouts. Then the cave answered. A voice, no, a chorus of voices layered over each other, rising from every surface. "One life," it said. The words reverberated, male and female, young and old, impossible to pin. One life to keep balance. Riley flinched, clamped her hands over her ears. "Caretaker," she hissed. I gripped the token in my pocket. It burned hotter than before, like it wanted to speak on its own. The passage widened into a chamber. At its center, Kovacs hung entangled in fibrous growths, roots, or veins, or both, pinned like an insect in amber. Her eyes fluttered, her chest rose shallow. The chorus rolled again. One life, one must pay. I stepped forward, heart pounding. Take me. Riley grabbed my arm. Jack, no. I wrenched free. It's me they want. My name's already in their damn ledger. I raised my voice to the vaults. You hear me? I trade myself. Let her go. The roots tightened around Kovacs. Her radio squealed. Riley's face hardened. She yanked her pack open, pulled a bright orange bundle, an inflatable airbag rescue pack, standard for avalanche extraction. Not today, she growled. Before I could stop her, she jammed the canister into a gap between the roots and slammed the trigger. Compressed gas thundered, the bag inflating with brutal force. The roots tore, snapping like cables. The chamber shook. Dust rained down. Kovacs dropped, limp but breathing. Riley dove to drag her clear. The chorus screamed, every voice at once, fury tearing through the stone. I reached for Kovacs, but my palm seared. The token in my pocket writhed like it had grown claws. I yanked it free too late. The brass disc fused to my hand, oak leaf stamp branding deep into my skin. My nerves lit like live wire. Through the agony, the Caretaker's chorus whispered, soft, intimate, only for me. Balance claimed, promise bound. I collapsed, the mark glowing faint through the flesh of my palm. I came up from blackness to the smell of copper and pine sap. My hand still burned where the token had fused, flesh ridged with the imprint of that oak leaf, edges scarlet and raw. Riley hovered above me, pale and furious. You scared the hell out of me, she muttered. And now you stink. She wasn't wrong, something clung to me beyond blood and dirt, a trace. When I stood, the world had changed. The limestone air carried threads, faint odors that weren't natural, ozone, singed hair, rot turned sweet. Each whiff tugged me like a leash. You feel sick? Riley asked. No, I said. I feel guided. I followed the current without thinking, nose burning as if a match burned in my sinuses. Every step dragged me closer to a residue the caretakers had left. It wasn't a gift. It was a leash knotted tight around my nerves. Back at the station, Kovacs slept under watch. Riley spread the topo maps across the table, marking each vanishing with a red X. Look, she said, circling them. From above, the marks weren't random. They curved, looped, tightened, spiraling in toward the high meadow, a plateau scarred with an old stone ring. The vanishings are leading us there, Riley said, like a funnel. I pressed my palm to the map. The oak leaf seared hotter, my hand knew the spiral. We hiked at dusk, climbing switchbacks until the trees thinned. Trace smell thickened, wet fur, bile, musk. The first shape broke from the timber, an elk cow, antlers crooked, wrong, hide patchy. Then another and another. A whole herd fanned out across the slope. Their movements were jerky, off sync. When they opened their mouths, no bugles came. Instead, they let loose stolen sounds, a hiker's shout, a woman's laugh, the whimper of a child. Borrowers on four legs, mimics wearing elk-like clothes. They closed in, eyes burning amber. Cancel tone, Riley barked, yanking a device from her pack. She twisted the dial and a sub-40 Hz pulse throbbed out so low it rattled teeth. The herd staggered, heads jerking, legs splaying. One collapsed outright, twitching. The rest wheeled and bolted, vanishing into timber, their patchwork cries trailing after them. I spat bile. Good trick. Riley wiped sweat from her temple. Not a trick, science. The meadow opened wide under the rising moon. At its center, the stone ring waited, 12 slabs sunk into the earth, blackened with lichen. Inside, photographs fluttered on wooden stakes. Dozens. We moved closer. Each photo was a missing face. Vanessa Cole, Austin Hale, Martin Wu, others stretching back decades. At the ring's center stood one more stake, still damp with ink. My stomach dropped. The photo was mine. The first strike hit just after midnight. A jag of white fire forked down the ridge, thunder punching the valley like a fist. Then the next, and the next. By dawn, the park was choking in wildfire smoke. Sirens wailed through the canyon. Families jammed the service road, headlights dim in the haze. Rangers barked orders, half their voices breaking, half pretending they weren't terrified. The park wasn't just burning. It was being cut in half. I watched orange veins crawl down a slope that shouldn't have burned so fast. Too wet, too early in the season. The smoke smelled wrong, sweet, metallic, almost electric. Riley snapped her binoculars shut. This isn't natural spread, it's moving with intent. And she was right. The fire lines curved like hands, steering traffic, funneling wildlife. Herds that should have scattered were being driven. The caretaker wasn't hiding anymore. It was using the storm to flush prey. We loaded evacuees into ranger trucks, sent them down the canyon. Kovac stayed behind, coughing through a bandana, fury barely contained. "Look," she said, jabbing at the fire map. "It's not random. These ignition points make a net. Somebody or something is deciding who stays in the burn zone." I didn't argue. My palm burned hot against the oak leaf brand. Every gust of smoke carried the trace of choice. Families waved through, loners penned in. "They're hunting the bad actors," Riley said grimly. "Whatever doesn't belong to the balance. And who decides what doesn't belong?" I muttered. The smoke didn't answer, but the token in my hand pulsed like it knew. We pushed through the haze, climbing switchbacks until the old CCC-era lookout loomed above the ridge. Its tower windows were cracked, metal stairs rusted. Lightning still stalked the peaks, each flash carving shadows into the smoke. Inside, the floorboards were blackened, not just fire-scorched, carved. A message seared deep into the planks: "Pay what you owe." The letters still smoked faintly, as though branded moments before. Riley covered her mouth, whispering, "Jack, this is for you." I didn't need telling. The mark in my palm throbbed with each syllable, hot enough to blister. Back at the ranger station, I stumbled to the ledger room, smoke clinging to my clothes. The brass cages rattled on their own, pages fluttering though no wind stirred. The central ledger slammed itself open. Ink bled up through the paper as if written from beneath. Letters stamped neat and final. Authorized removal, Jack Mercer. The date was today. My chest went cold. Riley's gasp sounded miles away. And in the silence that followed, I swore I heard the caretaker's chorus murmur with satisfaction. Debt collected. The river was supposed to be our ally, a clean artery cutting through the park. Instead, it became a morgue. 3 bodies surfaced after the firestorm, tangled in driftwood, faces washed pale. But when the coroner unzipped the bags, we knew something was wrong. They weren't ours. Kovacs pulled me aside as the deputies whispered in the smoke. "None of them matched the missing," she said. "Not Wu, not Vanessa, not the boy." I stared at the drowned faces, cheeks gaunt, jawlines wrong for our century. "Then who the hell are they?" I asked. Riley leaned in with tweezers, lifting a shred from a coat seam. Under the floodlight, the fibers gleamed coarse and antique. "Wool serge," she muttered. "Hand-loomed. This cut hasn't existed since the 1930s. The room went still. By afternoon, the lab report confirmed it. Buttons stamped from a foundry that shut down in 1938. Shoe leather stitched with thread nobody's made in 80 years. These people died recently, Riley said, voice low, but their clothes belong to a different decade. I thought of Earl Maddox's words. The parks weren't founded, they were adopted. The cataracts upriver roared louder than normal, spray lifting like breath. My palm itched with the oak leaf scar. Time itself was bleeding at the seams. That night I walked the river under moonlight. The current glowed pale, stones gleaming like vertebrae. Each bend carried the trace, copper, ozone, sap. The mark in my palm throbbed to the rhythm of the water. Riley kept watch from the bluff, but I went down alone, following instinct. And then I saw him. Across the current, standing ankle-deep in the shallows, was Daniel Harlow, my old partner. The one I'd buried under a rockfall in '09. His hair was still the same, black and neat. His face unlined, frozen in the age he died. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked resigned. The river hissed between us, silver and merciless. "Daniel," I whispered. My voice broke on it. He didn't answer, just lifted his face to the moon and then locked eyes with me. Harlow raised a hand. His lips moved silently, but I knew what they formed. "Don't break the pact." The cataracts thundered. The river swelled higher, blotting his reflection. And when I blinked, he was gone. But the words clung, louder than the roar of water. The fire perimeter held for 2 days. Long enough for evacuees to clear, long enough for the forest to draw a breath. But the emptiness didn't last. At dawn, a game warden picked up chatter on the bands, poachers slipping in through the north spur using the smoke as cover. Rifles, dogs, trucks with plates removed. They thought the chaos was a cloak. It wasn't. We tracked them by their own arrogance. Beer cans dropped in the ash, tire ruts gouging the back trails. But before we found their camp, we found blood. Not theirs, not human. Something else had opened the deer they tried to haul. The carcass was left intact, meat untouched, only the eyes missing. "Something's hunting them," Riley said, scanning the timberline. "Something older than game wardens." I didn't argue. The mark in my palm already throbbed with recognition. We ghosted the poachers to a clearing where they'd rigged tarps and hung trophies. 8 men, lean and mean, confidence dripping off them like sweat. They weren't scared of fire or of law. Riley's jaw tightened. "They're human, Jack, stupid, cruel, but human. We can't let them be culled." I felt the token burn hotter. Caretaker's balance doesn't care about intentions, just wait. Too many poachers, not enough prey, it tilts. "You'd trade them like coins." She snapped. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure anymore where duty ended and where debt began. We tailed them to the old CCC sawmill, blackened beams still standing like ribs. The poachers laughed, kicked cans, stoked a bonfire with pallet wood. Then the predator arrived. It came out of the smoke, shaped like wolf in shadow, with antlers twisting from its back, eyes glowing amber. The caretaker had brought it here, same as a referee dragging fighters into the same ring. The herd dogs broke first, whining, bolting into the trees. Rifles snapped up. Muzzle flash seared the dark. The thing moved faster than the bullets could. Chaos ripped through the mill, barked commands, screams, the predator's roar. Sparks fell through the rafters, lighting the tarps. Riley yanked a flare from her vest, firing it high. Its arc painted the predator, and for one blink I saw its ribs hollow as a drum, its belly glowing faint with the same cold light as the jars below the station. "This isn't a fight," Riley shouted. "It's a test." We scrambled into the melee, smoke and steel choking the air. I pulled one man clear before claws shredded him. Riley shoved another behind a stack of timbers. Then the firelight flared and I saw it happen. A brass disc, identical to mine, tumbled from the dark and landed against Riley's palm. The oak leaf sigil seared deep, fusing, burning her skin. She screamed, dropped to one knee. The flare died, plunging the mill into shadow. 2 agents now bore the mark, 2 debts pledged, and the Caretaker's chorus whispered from the beams overhead. Balance restored. By the time we reached the meadow, the stone ring was already alive. Shadows bent inward, 12 stumps glowing faint with that same amber cold light, as if the earth itself had turned on lanterns. The Caretaker was waiting. The chorus filled the bowl of grass, layered and harmonic, every tree a speaker. The circle convenes, the tally must be kept, 1 debt released or 1 new claimed. The words rolled over us like thunder. My palm seared, Riley's mark burned in echo. The air smelled of ash and iron, judgment heavy enough to choke. I looked at Riley. Her face was pale but steady. "They're making us choose," she whispered. "Balance," I muttered. "Always balance." Back at the gate, the park wasn't silent either. Families of the missing had gathered, Vanessa's husband, Austin's parents, Tommy's shaken father. They'd lined the entrance road with candles in glass jars, glowing in neat rows. A vigil, but also a demand. Every hour the phones rang with state calls. The town wanted answers. Politicians wanted closure. Kovacs, still weak from her ordeal, leaned on the railing of the ranger porch and said it plain. "They don't care about the rules you're chasing. They care about their people. If you don't bring someone home soon, we'll be the next names in that ledger." Riley bit her lip, eyes wet. "We can't just pick a life to swap like coins." "They've forced us to," I said, "unless we make another door." The Caretaker's presence thickened around the Black Meadow circle. Wind hissed through the grass in rhythm like a pen scratching a page. I stepped into the ring. My voice cracked, but I kept it level. "You want balance, then we go back to the start. The first ledger, 1911, the first sin. You've been counting debts for a century, but what if you release the one you claimed first? Reset the scale." The shadows rippled. The stumps groaned like old bones shifting. Riley hissed, "Jack, what are you doing?" "Giving them a third option," I said. "Break the chain where it began, undo the original pact." The chorus swelled, voices overlapping until the trees themselves bowed. Then clear and singular the Caretaker spoke. "Bring me the first ranger's debt and the dead will walk home." The oak leaf mark in my palm blazed white hot. My knees buckled. Riley caught my arm, and in the firelit dark of the meadow, every candle down at the gate flickered at once, like the town itself had heard the bargain. The Caretaker's ultimatum sat heavy on us. Bring the first ranger's debt and the dead will walk home. That meant digging into a past no one wanted to remember. We started in town, dusty archives in the basement of a shuttered library, where volunteers filed yellowed papers beside stacks of church bulletins. Names, maps, accident reports. Buried in the margins, references to Ranger Elias Boone, 1911–1914, Sardi's first sworn guardian. The trail led to a mine adit collapsed in the 20s. The ledger noted it as Boone's last duty site, and a mile away, half swallowed by scrub oak, we found what was left of his homestead. One wall leaning, chimney throat caved in, but the roof still clung stubborn. On a splintered table inside sat a tin box, rust flaking like dried blood. We weren't alone. A shotgun racked behind us. An old woman stood in the doorway, hair white as snowmelt, hands steady despite the weight of the weapon. "Name's Alma Boone," she said. "Elias was my grandfather, and I know why you're here. We lowered our hands slowly. Alma set the shotgun aside and pulled a bundle from under her coat, bark-bound pages lashed with rawhide. The edges were blackened as though the forest itself had branded them. "He wrote this before he disappeared," she whispered. "My father swore never to open it, said it wasn't for us. But I've kept it safe. And if the caretaker's calling debts again, then maybe it's time." The confession weighed more than paper should. Riley held it like it might burn through her gloves. We brought the confession to the largest witness tree on the ridge, a ponderosa older than the park, carved with the sigils Riley had mapped. The roots spread wide like ribs breaking from the soil. Moonlight made the bark shimmer as Riley stepped into the circle. She untied the lashings and began to read aloud. Her voice carried words heavy with ink and guilt. "I pledged the first life. I struck the bargain with the caretakers. One ranger for the land to remain. I thought it noble, but it was theft, my theft. A debt I knew my sons and theirs would carry. Forgive me, for I have fed them us." The earth groaned. The tree's roots twisted, pulling upward. Soil spilled. Bones rose, ribs, femurs, a skull with jaw slack in eternal protest. The forest answered. The circle filled with a wind that came from nowhere, scattering pine needles in a cyclone. Riley's voice shook as she forced the last lines out. The bark-bound confession split apart in her hands. The bones began to knit themselves together. Ribs locked, vertebrae stacked, joints popped into place. For a heartbeat, it looked like a man was standing again, Ranger Elias Boone, whole, waiting to walk home. Then the spine curved wrong, the skull elongated, the sockets burned with amber cold light. What rose from the roots was Boone and something more, something borrowed by the caretaker, remade for balance. Riley stumbled back, whispering, "That's not him anymore." The thing tilted its head, bones creaking, and smiled with no lips. The thing that rose from the roots wasn't Ranger Elias Boone, not anymore. His bones had been threaded with something colder, amber light pulsing through the seams. But when he opened his jaw, the voice that crawled out wasn't aimed at us. It was aimed at the dark. "I have come," it rasped. "Caretaker, I am yours, take me back." For the first time since the ledger began bleeding ink, the shadows around the circle hesitated. The returned Boone wasn't hunting us. He was straining toward the presence that pressed through the tree line, calling for the caretaker itself. Riley swallowed hard. "Jack, it doesn't want people, it wants them." The oak leaf brand in my palm blazed until I thought bone would crack. The caretaker's chorus swelled, rolling out of every tree, and for the first time it sounded unsettled. I stepped into the ring, boots sinking in the churned soil, voice raw against the storm. "You want balance? Then take it from where it began. Take him, the first ranger, the one who signed the debt. His bones are yours." And in return, I shouted, raising my scarred hand, "You release everyone else, the modern taken, every name since. End it here." The air thickened like hot tar. Riley grabbed my sleeve, yelling over the gale, "Jack, that's not a trade, it's suicide." I shook her off. Better one harvest from the past than an endless field from the present. The Boone thing lifted its arms, vertebrae cracking. Light spilling like lantern fire through its seams. It was willing. The caretaker only had to agree. The sky tore open. Lightning forked across the meadow, thunder cracking over the stone ring. The circle of stumps blazed white, tokens on our palms glowing until the skin hissed. The ledgers in the ranger station, miles away, ignited as if doused in accelerant. Pages blackened, curling into ash. The chorus howled, voices split and braided, arguing with themselves. Balance or bargain, past or present. Riley screamed as her mark seared, dropping to her knees. My own hand felt carved hollow, bone scraped raw by fire. Still, I held it aloft. "Decide," I roared. "Him or me, Boone's harvest or my name in your book forever." The gale cut. The chorus dropped into silence so sudden it felt like deafness. Then a single voice, calm, low, final. "We choose you, Jack Mercer." The Boone thing froze, amber light flickering out. The roots sank back into the earth, taking him with them. And the mark in my palm flared blinding white, burning deeper than flesh, down into marrow. I woke with smoke still in my lungs and the oak leaf scar seared deeper into my hand. At first I thought it was dawn haze, the kind that rolls slow over the ridges. Then I saw the highway sign. The numbers were wrong. Where the road should have run straight through the valley, it bent left into a canyon that didn't exist yesterday. My watch said Thursday. The radio dispatch swore it was Wednesday. The caretaker had started rewriting the map. "Jack," Riley whispered, staring at her GPS. "It's shifting around us. The whole park, time, roads, even memory." I clenched my fist over the mark. Every beat of my pulse came with that wrong sap taste in the air. The caretaker wasn't just claiming me. It was redrawing reality to collect. We retreated to the CCC-era lookout, the only high ground with sightlines left. Riley set the drone uplinks. Kovacs, still battered, gathered locals, loggers, volunteers, even families of the missing who refused to leave. They carried axes, radios, chainsaws, anything that could make noise, light, resistance. "This is where it ends," Kovacs told them. "Caretakers feed on fear and silence. Tonight we give them neither." Riley looked at me, jaw hard. "You're not dying alone in this. We stand with you." For once I didn't argue. The storm broke just after midnight. The shadows poured uphill, amber eyes glowing, the hum thick enough to stagger men. The ledger fire roared through the timberline, pages unwritten, rewritten, demands screaming in chorus. My mark blazed until I smelled my own flesh cook, and then I smelled something else. Not sap, not blood, heartwood, the living core of the caretaker pulsing in the earth beneath the meadow. I gripped the token, lifted it like a blade, and walked the ridge. Every step cut a line of fire into the soil, not around rivers, not around trees, around people. "The balance ends here," I shouted. "You want a pact, you bind to us, not against us. Conservation without sacrifice, forests without blood." The token screamed white light. The air buckled, the shadow figures thrashed, but the new circle closed with a crack like a giant door slamming shut. The ledger burst into flame, ash scattered into the storm. When the silence fell, it was different. No chorus, no demands, just rain hissing through pine needles. The candles at the park gate still burned, and for the first time the families had names to hold. Every missing soul returned in photographs nailed to the circle stumps. Some would never come home, but their stories were released from the ledger's chains. The pact had been rewritten, not a toll of blood, a covenant of guardianship. At dawn, I found Riley asleep on the lookout floor, band still glowing faint. In the corner where sap bled from the logs, something had begun to write itself. Not in ink, in fresh amber resin, a new ledger. Only one name was written so far, each letter still wet and gleaming. Riley Torres. I closed my fist over my scar, feeling the heat return. The pact was new, but the balance was still watching.